In an age where the SUV reigns supreme, it feels like the compact car might have fallen out of favour with quite a few drivers. But in today's video, we're going to see what these smaller creations have to offer and why they might be worth considering as your next vehicle. First up, we've got the iconic Mini John Cooper Works 3-door hatch. It's a car with loads of sporty features, but that great sense of character that made the Mini so popular and so iconic throughout the years. We've also got the new Honda Jazz, which has the same practical approach as its predecessor, but a clean new hybrid engine that can make it even cheaper to run. This is a car to watch out for. And finally, we have the Aygo Cross from Toyota. Now, it's the latest incarnation of that famous Aygo, which was such a hit with first-time drivers and people who wanted a frugal way of getting about. This car throws in a new crossover-inspired design, but the same low-cost engine setup that should mean it won't cost the earth to run. So in today's video, we're going to check out what each of these cars has to offer and why you might be worth considering them as your next car. Now, the Honda Jazz has a boxy upright design for a reason. It's meant to be spacious and comfortable, so you can't fault it for looking a little bit cube-like on the road. However, Honda has aimed to spruce things up with some gloss black plastic sections, as well as loads of glass, which helps both give the outside a more visual appeal, while making sure that the inside is as light and airy as possible. The Mini continues to be one of the most iconic and good-looking cars on sale today. This 3-door hatch version, of course, has those iconically small proportions, while this John Cooper Works edition adds in some really performance-focused features such as the large intakes at the front and bigger alloy wheels with larger brakes behind them. Overall, it's still an incredibly smart design, and one which everybody knows. What Toyota has aimed to do with the Aygo is infuse it with some of the looks of a crossover, but maintain that small city car structure. It's why it looks like it's a little bit higher up, and you've got some chunky black plastic here and there to give it a kind of rugged, go-anywhere edge, even though, let's be realistic, it can't go everywhere. It's still really compact though, so it's great for people who live in the city, or even if you're often driving into multi-storey car parks where you want to make sure that you can get around without scraping the edges. This is a compact car, and it's a really easy one to live with as a result. The interior of the Jazz has a nicely futuristic feel to it, with loads of screens and dials and high definition readouts, all combining to make sure that everything's nice and clear and easy to read. This screen in the centre feels like it's been orientated a little too flat though, so when you're on the move, it feels a little bit tricky to operate. But it does have loads of good features, and it's all nice and quick and responsive. The material quality in here is good too, and I like the fact that there are some nice storage options dotted throughout the cabin. I'm not too sure about the design of the A-pillars. Obviously this is because the Jazz has quite an upright boxy design, but when you're approaching a junction or approaching a roundabout, having an extra pillar there just distracts your eye somewhat and you end up looking around it, even though there is some glass in the middle. Move to the back seats and you've got plenty of space. Again, that boxy design means that you've got loads of headroom, so even taller passengers are going to be able to get comfy there. There are also some nice charging options, and you've got ISOFIX points for child seats too. Move to the boot and you've got 304 litres of space to play with, and that's more than you get from something like a Ford Fiesta. There's also a cool little split level design, so you can expand that further, and there are the magic seats which you can fold up and over, allowing you to get taller items into the main part of the cabin. You could also probably keep a pet or dog there. The interior of the Mini has loads of those premium features that you might expect. Everything's tied together with a really nice sense of build quality, and there are loads of high-end features and fittings put here and there. This JCW model is obviously focused a little bit more around performance, which is why you've got these big bucket seats and this chunky steering wheel. Obviously, being the 3-door hatch, this Mini isn't all that practical in terms of rear seat space, and in fact, if you're going to take taller passengers back there, well, it might be best finding other alternatives of transport, and access, because you've got only one door either side, is quite tricky too. In terms of boot space, there's 211 litres of room back there, but there is a handy under boot floor storage area, and you can also lower the rear seats down if you want to extend the amount of space further. The interior of the Aygo Cross has more features than you might expect. For instance, we've got this large central display, and we've also got a useful multifunction steering wheel which gives you quick access to loads of features like the volume or the cruise control in this particular model. Material quality is by and large okay. There are some scratchy plastics here and there, but it's kind of what you'd expect from a small low-cost car. Move to the back seats and you'll find that there's not an awful lot of legroom there, and headroom is quite restricted by the shape of the Aygo Cross's roof. I've also found that when you're sitting back there, because of the thick pillars, you feel quite cocooned and it's a little bit constrictive. You'd like to have a little bit more light there if you could. Move to the boot and you've got 269 litres of space available when you load it to the roof. So actually, it's got a little bit more load room than you might think for a car of this size. You can, of course, lower the rear seats down and that takes that space even further. The Jazz is now only available as a hybrid, and that's a 1.5 litre petrol engine linked up with electric motors and a compact battery. You're only getting 106 brake horsepower, so it definitely can't match the Mini for outright performance, but it certainly feels more flexible than the Aygo and a little bit more grown up too. The only issue I have with the Jazz is the CVT gearbox, which is very noisy under hard acceleration, despite not really giving you any forward thrust to compensate for the amount of noise that it's making. However, if you'd like to find out more about the way the Jazz drives, then you can head on over to the motors.co.uk YouTube channel right now, where you can find my full driving impressions in our full review. The Jazz is also uber efficient, and Honda claims that you should be able to get around 60 mpg, which means that those trips to the fuel pump are going to be few and far between. When it comes to CO2 emissions, we're talking just 105 grams per kilometre, so it just misses out on being under that magical 100 grams marker, but it's still incredibly clean, and it should mean that those tax bills aren't too high for the Jazz. The Jazz is now only available as a hybrid, and that's a 1.5 litre petrol engine linked up with electric motors and a compact battery. Mini has always been proud on the way that its hatch drives, and okay, the go-kart feel might be something to do with marketing, but you can see how it's trying to translate into the way this car drives. You're getting a really good sense of connection between yourself and the road through well-weighted steering and suspension, which, okay, in this JCW version is quite bumpy, but that all adds to the overall character of this car and makes it feel somewhat alive. This JCW version has a 2 litre turbocharged petrol engine with around about 230 brake horsepower, and that's good for a 0 to 60 miles an hour time of just over 6 seconds. Despite this, Mini says that you could still get around 40 mpg, so although it might not be as efficient as something like the Jazz or even the Aygo in this test, it's not going to cost too much to fill it up, and you are being rewarded by a very involving driving experience with loads of great features. I'd actually forgotten how fast Mini John Cooper Works cars were. I'd not driven one in quite a while. But if you'd like to find out more about what this really exciting hatch is like to drive, then head on over to the motors.co.uk YouTube channel and you can find our full review on this car, where I go through in a little more detail at what this car is like from behind the wheel. The little Aygo Cross is by far the smallest and lowest powered model that we have of the three today, but that doesn't make it any less exciting or involving. In fact, with just 70 brake horsepower on offer and a 0 to 60 miles an hour time of over 14 seconds, it's not what you'd call quick. But because you have to make the most of every single one of those 70 horses, it's actually quite involving, and it's got that stripped back driving experience that makes cars like these more rewarding than you might expect. It's also very compact, it's very simple, and with fuel economy of over 56 mpg, it's not going to cost the earth to run either. This is an ideal car for first-time drivers or for people who just want a car that's going to be zero frills and get them from A to B without costing too much. However, if you'd like to find out more about what the Aygo Cross is like to drive, then you can go on over to the motors.co.uk YouTube channel right now and you'll be able to find our full review where I go through just what this car is like to drive in a little bit more depth. Each of these cars shows that the compact segment is alive and well, and I think against a traditional crossover or an SUV, each of these vehicles could actually slot in really nicely and definitely play a part in someone's life, particularly those who live in urban areas or don't have quite as much parking space available. The Mini, it'll come as probably no surprise, is the most sporting here, and it feels the most involving to drive and the most rewarding to drive as well. It's also backed up by a really classy interior and loads of character, and you can understand why it's so popular. The good news is that there are loads of them on the used market, so there are deals out there to be had. The Jazz is a bit of a dark horse here because the hybrid powertrain that it has delivers great efficiency and more than enough performance for daily driving, while I really like the fact that its interior is focused so heavily around practicality that you could use it for all different types of things. It's something of a multi-tool type of car. The Aygo Cross I find immensely endearing. Its low, bare-bones nature means that it's actually quite characterful to drive, and as I mentioned in my video, it's a little bit like driving your first car, and it inspires the idea of trips away, not costing too much and not having to use too much fuel. Each car here is going to offer something different, but also be able to be run for not too much money and slide into different lifestyles depending on what it is that you're looking for. Which one would I choose? Well, I'm actually quite split between the Aygo Cross and the Jazz. The Jazz itself has loads of cool features inside, and I think if you're after a family car that isn't overly large but still has loads of space, then that could be the car for you. Whereas the Aygo Cross, well, I like the fact that it isn't too complicated and it just drives well. It's obviously not going to be the ideal choice for a motorway mileage cruiser. I think you'd probably be leaning towards the Mini, but for all other people, this could be a great way of saving money on fuel and overall maintenance bills. I must say thank you for watching this motors.co.uk 3-car review on the Mini 3-door hatch, the Honda Jazz and the Toyota Aygo Cross. Now, let us know in the comment section which of these 3 cars you would choose, or if you'd pick a compact car that's different altogether, or maybe even a crossover or an SUV. Leave us a like if you have enjoyed this video, and please remember to subscribe to the motors.co.uk YouTube channel and just hit that bell icon and you get notified each time we upload a new video.